Welcome to the Rock and Recovery Talk Show.
Hi everybody, and welcome to this week's show of Rock and Recovery. My name's Michelle, and today we have Carlee Hulsizer on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So stay with us. We got a great show coming up. We'll be right back. Hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking about what a busy month we had. Busy.
Oh, like the magician from Frosty the Snowman. Busy. I love that guy. I mean, I don't like him because, he tried to steal his hat back, but whatever. Frosty needed it more than he did.
Yes, okay, and moving on. We had a great trip. We just got back from Las Vegas, and we were there for a Mobilize Recovery event. What were your thoughts on that, Carlee?
So, I really liked how strategic everything was. Like, every little detail was thought out and planned and intentional, and that made me feel important. But not only important, but it made me feel really valued. Like they invited people to attend this, and they did a selective process, and over 1,000 people applied, and there were only 100 of us there, and all together, and I don't know, it was just all the work that went behind, the behind the scenes stuff really made me feel wow, not only did they pick me, but they value me being here.
Yeah, I feel the same way. To be selected to be a part of something like that was fantastic. And to be able to meet the other people that were selected and just tap into their strength, that was a little overwhelming as well.
Yeah, meeting people, it's interesting because, working in the field and working with the state agency that oversees, the recovery stuff, I hear a lot New York State is leading the way and X, Y, and Z, and while that's great, and while I think that we're leading the way in some areas, there are some states that are far ahead of New York State in terms of recovery high schools, collegiate recovery programs. There's a few things that Texas is doing way ahead of us, but then we look at states like Hawaii and Alaska where they're 3-4 years behind. Yeah. So we are leading the way in a lot of stuff, but I think we don't want to get caught up in that because there's a lot we can learn from what other states are doing right now that we could be doing better on.
Yes, and it's awesome to find out what's working in other places and combining resources and information.
Right, because if they did it this way, then why can't we do it that same way?
Yes.
Hello. What a concept.
So let's back it up just a little bit. Mobilize Recovery is an event that we attended that was put on by Ryan Hampton, which I'm a fan. I know you're a fan. We love Ryan Hampton.
We love Ryan.
And he's somebody, in case you don't know, he used to work in the White House under Bill Clinton's administration. And he is a huge recovery advocate. He's done a lot of really cool stuff. He's in the fight against Purdue Pharma. He wrote a book called The American Fix. He's just right up there with, he's on the front lines of trying to fight the drug addiction crisis that we're in right now.
Absolutely is.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting, meeting him because this is somebody that I've looked up to. I have his book, which I forgot to have him sign, but, seeing him and, watching him work and watching his attention to detail behind the whole thing, I was wow, this is an event for us, but this is work for him, you know what I mean? So it was kind of cool to see him in action because he's kind of this guy that you see on social media and you hear about in the news, but to see him in person doing his thing, Yeah.
Yeah.
It was inspiring.
If anybody's not familiar, please Google him because he's fantastic and you can
Follow
learn
him
a lot.
on Instagram and Twitter too, because he's got all of his policy stuff and things that he's advocated for. He's very open about it and his recovery, so.
Yeah, he's a good resource to have, and I'm just really happy to have met him. So he put together this event, brought people from every single state across the whole U.S. together, and it was like 3 days of intense meeting after meeting. Every single speaker that was there, it was imperative that they were there. There was no fluffiness. There was no like downtime. It was information after information, and like my little brain was trying to keep up with all of the information, writing stuff down, but everything that they said was so awesome, and we're going to be using it in our own community.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot more to come on that issue with Mobilize Recovery. So we'll keep you informed. We'll let you know what's going on. We'll keep you updated. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Youth Voices Matter. Hi everybody, welcome back to Rock and Recovery. Today we're going to be talking about Youth Voices Matter and a focus group that Carlee had the opportunity to attend yesterday. Tell us all about it.
Certainly. So yesterday I was invited to go to Albany to participate in a focus group with ASAP, which is the Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Providers. Okay. There's a lot of acronyms in our world.
Yes.
And the New York State Certification Board also hosted this focus group, so they work together. And what they're doing is they're putting together a SERPA-Y, which is SERPA Youth. So the original, for those of you who don't know what SERPA stands for, it's a Certified Recovery Peer Advocate. And, we have the standard SERPA, and then we also have a SERPA for families that, is new and recent. And now we're going to be having a SERPA Youth. So
okay, hold up for a second.
Yeah.
So, a Certified Recovery Peer Advocate.
Correct.
And that is somebody who is trained to be able to deal with somebody as a peer to try to help them
Right.
in the recovery.
Right.
Okay.
So they use a lot of like coaching techniques, motivational interviewing, and really guide that person in their journey of recovery. And it's separate from a counselor where, a counselor can't like take you out to coffee one-on-one, but a peer can. You can go out to coffee with a peer and like just do life with this person. And with that, there's ethics. And that's a big thing that we talked about yesterday. And how, we looked over the ethics, the ethical code and stuff for the SERPA. And then we saw the addendum that the SERPA family came up with in addition to the original ethics. And we added some. And so it was interesting to just put myself in the shoes of a young person who might be utilizing this service, and in the shoes of somebody between the ages of 18 and 30, because that's the age for the SERPA Youth. You can apply by the age of 30 or complete the course and stuff by the age of 30. If you turn 31, 32, 33 and you were already a SERPA-Y, you can stay a SERPA-Y if you're over that age. So there's not like an age of retirement or anything.
Okay.
In case anybody out there is interested. But yeah, it was interesting to put myself in that position of, what would a SERPA-Y need for ethics, and what would be ethical in terms of a young person as well.
Before we get to that, I want to talk more about the benefits of having that certification as a peer.
Yeah.
Now they started with the regular SERPA, which is somebody who's struggled with drug addiction, talking to somebody else. And because they've kind of been through the same situation,
Right.
there's an understanding that they have and a common language that you use when you've been affected by this.
Right.
And then they branched out and they wanted to make a SERPA for the families too. Because they come to understand that as a family member, when somebody that you love is addicted to drugs, it affects everybody. And the trauma that's inflicted is horrible. So they wanted to be able to afford the family a way of healing as well. So that's brilliant, right? And now the SERPA Y, what do you think the reason is for them to have a special youth division of this?
Well, we see that the youth recovery movement has really been, taking off in New York State. It kind of started with Youth Voices Matter, with the state wanting to create this network of youth and young adults in recovery. Like the first thing was that really exploded on the map of New York was Friends of Recovery, New York. They created these RCOs and these communities of people in recovery across the state, learning how to advocate, learning how to just social change and changes in stigma and reducing the stigma and bringing awareness in different communities across the state. So they started with that, and then they were like, oh, like young people are forgotten, part of the equation here. So
thank goodness.
I'm glad that they did.
They stopped to recognize that, because we don't discriminate in recovery, and you can't discriminate somebody because of age either. If somebody wants to get in recovery and they've had enough at 13, 14, 12, whatever, they should be allowed to come into recovery too.
Right, so like seeing that and also understanding that even though even though SERPAs are not counselors, when we look at people who have their KSAC, there's a KSAC T, I believe, for teens. You need to be certified in having your KSAC for young people as well. So I think they're trying to mirror that. I don't know exactly why they decided to do that, like why they wanted to differentiate between the SERPA and the SERPA youth, but I'm glad that they did, because if nothing else, it brings more attention to the fact that young people are recovering and need recovery.
I think that it's important to have the SERPA Y, and I'll tell you what I think. There's a way that a kid could talk to a kid that a 70-year-old there's a language barrier.
I agree. However, like I said, just because you turn 31 doesn't mean, and you already have the certification, doesn't mean you can't still work with youth.
Right.
And as of right now, well, I don't really know that. Never mind. But I agree with you. I think an 18-year-old talking to a 17-year-old is going to be more effective than anything else.
Yeah. There's something about being able to identify with the person that's trying to help you. If you can identify with them, you can get a lot further.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to go to a break, but we'll be right back. Rockin' Recovery. Today we're talking about the SERPA Y. And you had attended a focus group yesterday.
Correct.
And the highlight of that for you was the ethics of it.
I loved that.
Yeah, tell us about it. What are you talking about, ethics?
So whether something is ethical or not.
Okay.
Good practice and just being morally conscious of my decisions and my interactions with other people.
Okay.
So I think that was my favorite part, because it allowed us to do a little bit of problem solving, like ahead of time. Like, what if this happens? How are we going to address it now before it happens or before it becomes an issue, or what are the penalties going to be because of that? And, we got to talking about just a whole bunch of stuff, that possibilities and stuff like that. So
it's important that there's ethics involved in this type of thing, because people that come into recovery are very vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And easy prey. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Yep.
And you have a lot of charlatans out there taking advantage. And there's a lot of people on the ground doing great work. These startup not-for-profit organizations, which I consider myself a part of, But there's a lot of people coming in too that are trying to take advantage and make a quick dollar, saying, preying on grieving families and preying on the people that really don't know any better. So that's awful. And I think it's fantastic that you're trying to safeguard our community and the young people that, could possibly have a problem. So yay for Youth Voices Matter, for being a part of that. That's great.
So, one of the big ones, and I'm surprised that, we broke up into 2 groups of 3. There were 6 of us that were invited to go there. And we broke up into 2 groups of 3 and came up with, additional ethic stuff that we wanted to add to it. And one of them, I noticed that in the SERPA training, the SERPA ethics, they had sexual misconduct. And I was like, oh, good, we're addressing that. But nothing specific to young people. I'm like, okay, in my head I have a scenario of 13-year-old female working with a SERPA Y male who's 27. What are the ethics that have to go into that relationship? Because it's not a romantic relationship, but it's still a relationship that's being built. And
it's very personal.
It is very personal.
When you start talking about stuff that includes recovery, and you start talking about your innermost intimate thoughts, that's very, very personal. You definitely would feel a connection with the person you're talking to.
Correct. So I brought that up as an issue, but I also played devil's advocate on myself. And I said, well, you can't, first of all, for the male who's 28, who's the SERPA Y, you can't deny him a job just because he's a male, just because of his age.
Right.
Can't discriminate. And likewise, this young girl might really connect and relate to him, might remind her of her older brother, her father. It might work out and be a good relationship, and he might not have any wrong intentions, and neither would she, so it's it was one of those things where do we make the rule for the exceptions of that, if that makes sense, or do we just make the rule and set the tone and have it be just a blanket? I don't know if that makes sense, but
it's how would you handle that? Do you don't want to be discriminatory against somebody that could possibly help, but at the same time, that there could be other issues as well.
So we talked a lot about being trauma informed and having trauma informed trainings. For example, let's say, and being self-aware, which is also in the definition of the SERPA Y. It states in the first part of the sentence, this person is self-aware.
What does self-aware mean, Carl?
Well, we branched out on that, and that was actually one of the questions at the end that me and my partner worked on, was what does it mean? What does self-aware mean? We said things like it means recognizing your strengths. It means recognizing when to ask for appropriate help. It means recognizing that I am an individual separate from another individual's circumstances or situation, so establishing boundaries. We came up with a few other things, but those were the ones that I can remember right now. But
to be able to see yourself as you actually are.
Yeah.
Right?
Essentially, yeah.
Yes, and not be codependent on the relationship that you're forming with somebody else as well.
Gotcha. So to go back to the ethics of young female working with older male, we did a lot of talk about being trauma informed, being self-aware. Let's say this young girl, in her active use participated in some behaviors that aren't necessarily the healthiest or the safest. Having that male assess the situation and understand maybe I'm not the appropriate person. Maybe we want to go with a younger female or, somebody else who can better handle or has more experience. If you're talking about a peer, this is somebody who's had similar experience as you. And it might not only include substance use. It might include behaviors that went along with the substance use. So being able to assess the situation and say, maybe I'm not the right person, and humble yourself and say there's somebody better, and looking at that individual as, you know, somebody who needs to grow and prosper in their recovery.
I like that. And one thing that I like about the way you put that is that we're not blaming a 13-year-old girl for having behaviors that she has due to her addiction, but we don't, we want to help her to be able to overcome that.
We want to protect her.
Exactly.
Is the issue.
Exactly.
And I think that if there was a training in place, and here's how we solve that, is maybe not necessarily adding something to the already, you know, written ethics under sexual misconduct, but including a training specifically for the SERPA Y that includes understanding, being sensitive to young people, and understanding the vulnerability, the added vulnerability that not only you're a person in recovery, but you're a young person as well. Like, your brain isn't fully developed. There's a lot of vulnerable, you know, stuff going on. So including a training to kind of safeguard that whole thing, and really stress the importance of that.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I know that in the medical community, and even as like a teacher, lots of times when we're dealing with a student, or if a doctor's dealing with a patient, they won't be in the room alone with this person. Or like as a teacher, I was told, keep the door open, never close the door if you're alone with a student. And I think like having that idea of like transparency or oversight, you know? So I wonder if that would be helpful. What do you think?
There's a level of confidentiality that, you know, we were talking about confidentiality in terms of parents too. You know, even down to social media releases. If we were to take a photo with our recovery and we were to, you know, use the photo on social media or whatever, like, if they're under a certain age, not only would they have to sign a consent form, but their parent would. And I raised the question, because everyone was like, yeah, the parent could sign the consent form and sign off on it. And I raised the question, if the parent is involved in this decision-making, what's to say the parent can't be involved in all of the decision-making? Where's the confidentiality line going to be drawn? So
it's complicated stuff.
It's complicated stuff, and it is up to the individual. It is up to the young person. The parent is not going to be involved in that, as far as I know. And you know, even when it comes down to courts, like treatment court, if you're there, if a SERPA is there, this is any type of SERPA, Certified Recovery Peer Advocate, for those of you just tuning in. If any SERPA is in court and is asked a question about, did your client attend this? Did your client go to this? It's all confidential. Anything that your client says to you, completely confidential. You are an advocate for your recovery, and you don't stray away from anything. And that's another thing that we talked about, was adults have a hard time staying on topic when a judge is asking them that stuff. Like, how, like an 18-year-old SERPA Y being asked that, like, just instilling more confidence and like more trainings and making them feel confident in what they're saying. So.
Gotcha. We're gonna have to go to a break. We'll be back. A lot of the 12-step programs, one of the keys to the 12-step program is that the common bond of having an addiction brings you together, and that common bond overrides all the other stuff, like whether it's, you know, the age difference or difference of religion or anything like that. And I agree with it 100%. But there's something about talking with somebody that you can identify with even beyond that, that brings you the hope of recovery. And
in early recovery, I needed to see other young people recovering, because that was a huge barrier that I had, was my age. And when I did, and once I got into recovery, I dipped my toes in a little bit, and I drank the Kool-Aid and I liked it. I like all those barriers and all those, you know, the age, the race, the gender, like that really didn't matter.
Recovery is a process. It's not something that happens like in a second or after you complete your treatment program. There's like not a cure for it. It's a process. And I've noticed that the people who stay in recovery and go on to live lives that are happy and healthy are the ones that keep doing the same things that they did in early recovery. They don't like graduate from it. There's certain things that we keep in place. Not that we don't change, because we do, but there's a lot of things that we keep the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of things we keep the same, not everything. I know for me, one of the biggest things that's changed are the people that I have in my life. You know, the group of people that I came into recovery with is not necessarily the group of people that I still hang out with. And sometimes, you know, some people grow faster than others and you can outgrow friendships. Sometimes people decide to go back out and start using again, which is unfortunate. But that's another thing is like people. Like sometimes we have to change people, places, and things while in recovery too.
Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely. And sometimes somebody will come into your life that's perfect for you at that time, but then, you know, something else happens in both directions, you know, where they need something else and you need something else.
It's not always about, you know, what I need. It could be about what they need too. There was a reason for it, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back next week, and we'll see you then. Bye.